Now with that, I want you to open your programs, and we will begin with introductory remarks from President Frederick. And then the program will proceed as printed. Thank you very much for coming out this evening, and we hope you enjoy all the activities and stay around for the reception that's at 6:30 or after the program is over. Thank you again. Dr. Pegg.
Good afternoon. So this is certainly one of the highest honors that I can have to introduce a gentleman who I will first start by describing as one of America's great orators. My mentor, Dr. LaFall, I think is one of those, and anytime I talk about great orators, I think if you hadn't had the pleasure of hearing President Robalski speak, then you have missed an experience. This is not an event when he shows up, it's quite an experience, and so we're certainly pleased to have him here. And to have him on Howard University's campus while we celebrate our sesquicentennial makes it that much more special. So I really appreciate him taking the opportunity to spend some time with us. It's only fitting that President Robalski serve as a keynote speaker as you explore the topic of broadening participation in American education, with a special focus on the underrepresentation of African Americans in STEM disciplines. One of the things that one of the gifts, the many gifts that he has given, not just to higher education in this country, but to Howard University specifically, is our provost. Anthony Wuto is a graduate of UMBC, and the best form of flattery, they say, is imitation. And so one of the things that Provost Wuto decided to start here was our Bison STEM Scholar program. And I, without any shame, will let you know that we have absolutely borrowed that from the Meyerhoff program at UMBC. So I want to thank you for providing us with that example, President Robalski. He has been very successful at cultivating University of Maryland, Baltimore County's reputation for steering African American students towards science and engineering, fields in which they have been traditionally underrepresented. He has also been quoted as saying, "I often say to people that yes, over half of our students are in science fields, but the other half are in the arts." And when I visited with him, one of the buildings that he will take you by is his new art center because of how proud he is of that focus. And I've heard him speak and say and talk about this, and I'm sure he'll probably mention it in his talk today, that one of the things, if you look at Nobel laureates, if you look at members of the American Academy of Science, etc., many of them are very, very well accomplished musicians, artists, etc. And so that's not just a matter of talk, but it is a matter of fact in terms of outcomes and what those outcomes look like. Dr. Robalski is a charismatic leader who, as a preteen, was heavily involved in the fight for civil rights in the early 60s in his home state of Alabama. And this is something that he wears as a proud legacy as he tries to impart that knowledge on what we do around civil rights today. President Robalski has spent nearly a quarter century at the helm of UMBC, striving to channel minorities toward grad school. As a result of those diligent efforts of his team, UMBC is now one of the nation's leading sources of African American PhDs in science and engineering, and almost half of its seniors go immediately to grad school. If you look at African Americans who have MD PhDs as well, and you must note that there is not a medical school or hospital on his campus, they are also at the very top of leading that production nationally as well. He has been recognized outside of the sphere of higher education because of his impact. He was named one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine in 2012, and one of America's best leaders by U.S. News and World Report in 2008. He also received the TIAA Crefts Theodore Hesburgh Award for Leadership Excellence. And Theodore Hesburgh was the president of Notre Dame, and also, I would say, one of the leaders of higher ed that many of us continue to admire because of his impact on social issues during his presidency as well. But he's also received the Carnegie Corporation's Academic Leadership Award and the Heinz Award for contributions to improving the human condition, again, impacting way beyond higher ed. UMBC has been recognized as a model for inclusive excellence by such publications as U.S. News, which the past 8 years has recognized UMBC as a national lead in academic innovation and undergrad teaching. He is born in Birmingham, Alabama. He's a graduate of Hampton University, which was known as Hampton Institute at that time, with highest honors in mathematics. See, I was going to stay away from saying the other HU, but since you went there, I would have to say the other HU. But since I spoke to President Harvey today, and I'm going to be talking there on Friday, I'll keep that quiet. He also received his MA in mathematics and PhD in higher education, administration, and statistics from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. That's my formal introduction. On a personal note, I want to tell you, mentorship, I think, is extremely important, and it's a two-way street. And one of the things that we must always recognize is we get as much from our mentors as our mentors get from our mentees. And one of the things that I have appreciated even before coming into this role was Dr. Robalski's willingness and always making himself available to me, whether it was solicited or unsolicited. And I appreciate that because these are isolating jobs. And oftentimes, while you're dealing with difficulties, you can tend to isolate yourself while you're trying to work through that. And there's nothing like a call in the middle of that discussion or that thought process that can help you and free you in terms of your thought process about what to do next. And I certainly always appreciate that. So in my opinion, you are the Dean of University Presidents in America, and we are certainly glad to have you here today to present to us. Without further ado, President Robalski. Oh, I'm sorry. And I apologize, I didn't read my program, so I'm going to have you go back. Yeah, she's absolutely right, which is why she was telling me read the program, because she knew this was going to happen, so I apologize. I'll turn it back over to your program. Dean.
We certainly forgive you, President Frederick, because we know that you show favor on the School of Education. And thank you also for Provost Wuta for joining us, Dr. DeBroy as well, to hear the wisdom that I know that we're going to remember and treasure from President Hrabowski this afternoon. Well, good evening, everyone. And it is my honor to extend a welcome once again to the 30th Annual Charles Thompson Lecture Series. The inaugural lecture, which you already heard is in 1980, was delivered by Dr. Stephen J. Wright. Dr. Wright was an alumnus of the Howard University School of Education and served as the 7th president of Fisk University and also led the United Negro College Fund. His lecture at the time was entitled, "The Tragic Waste of the Black Mind and Talent." In 38 years, there have been 5 lecturers that focus on issues of higher education. In 1982, Dr. Bernard Harleston, his lecture was entitled Higher Education for Minorities and the Challenge of the 1980s. In 1986, Dr. Herman Branson and Dr. Luther Foster lectured on the hazards in blacks in higher education. In 1993, Dr. Charles Willey lectured on Black colleges are not just for blacks anymore. In 1998, Dr. Manning Marable, What America Thinks, Affirmative Action, and the Pursuit of Equality. And our last lecture in 2011 by Dr. Christopher Brown II lectured on the declining significance of historical black colleges and universities' relevance, reputation, and respect in Obama America. Today, we welcome Dr. Freeman Hrabowski to continue this legacy. This annual lecture allows us to keep pushing the discourse that's grounded in data. The Charles Thompson Lecture Committee, in which I've had the pleasure to serve on for 11 years, has insisted that these lectures are inclusive of data that speaks to the condition of Black education and empowers us with the knowledge to address issues in the ways that we know best, through teaching, through research, through leadership, psychological and counseling services, policy advocacy, and community mobilization. The lecture also reminds us to push past and push through the disparaging discourse that attempts to cloud our vision and redirect our efforts. The lecture and the Journal of Negro Education go hand in hand. The journal continues to be our resounding vehicle to make sure that we stay woke. Now is the time I must give the shout outs that are so well deserved. I'd like to acknowledge the Charles Thompson Lecture Committee once again for all the work that they have done. I'd like to also acknowledge the Howard University School of Education faculty. If you all can stand and be recognized. Thank you, faculty, and I commend you for pausing your classroom instruction to make sure that our students are present in this scholarly tradition. I'd like to also recognize the Journal of Negro Education staff, both past and present, for their amazing work to grow and sustain our audience. Journal staff, can you please stand? Thank you. And I do hope that our inaugural PhD cohort of Higher Education Leadership and Policy Studies is present here. Are you here? Can I see you? And last, okay, there that you all have to represent and stand and be counted. Thank you for doing that. And lastly, do we have any Bison STEM scholars in the audience? Please stand and be recognized. Dr. Hrabowski, these fine undergraduate students are here to see you and learn from your example. Recognizing that the time is always now, we are committed to making an impact. As we continue to refine the ways that our research informs our activism, we must document how our activism impacts our research. We look forward to hearing from you, Dr. Freeman-Hrabowski, on broadening participation in American higher education, a special focus on the underrepresentation of African Americans in STEM disciplines. Thank you for being here, and welcome to you all. Dr. Thompson. We go way back.
All right. Good evening. All right. Thank you so much, Dean Williams, for those remarks. As editor-in-chief of the Journal of Negro Education, I'd like to welcome all of you all to the 38th annual Charles Thompson Lecture Series. Before we get started, I want to recognize a few people who are very important too. Dean Williams has already recognized my staff, but as editor, I really want to give a heartfelt thank you to the staff of the Journal of Negro Education who works very, very hard. They are the anchor of the journal, and they make sure that we are continuously published for as long as we have. So please give our staff a round of applause. I think they're outside working. There they are. All right. Also want to thank President Wayne Frederick. This is actually the 9th Charles Thompson lecture that I've been a part of since I've been at Howard University, and probably my 11th one attending. And this is the first time we've had a sitting president since I've been here to join us. So thank him so much for coming. And not only did he come, but he brought key staff members. Provost Wutall is here, and a good friend of mine, the executive vice president, Tashnian DeBroy, is also here. So thank you all so much for coming. Since this is a function of the Journal of Negro Education, also want to give a shout out to all of those who are so important to the journal. So if we have any editorial board members here, can you please stand? Thank you. Do we have anyone here who has peer reviewed for the journal? Please stand. All right. Do we have anyone who has published in the journal? Please stand. We need to get that up a little bit more. Do we have anyone who has read an article in the Journal of Negro Education? Please stand. No, it's too many people sitting down. Come on. We got to do better than that. All right. All right, so the Charles Thompson Lecture Series is a living tribute to the founder of the Journal of Negro Education, who passed in 1979, 1 year before we had the first Charles Thompson Lecture. And we've had continuous Charles Thompson Lecture Series every year since then. This year, the Journal of Negro Education celebrated 85 years of continuous publication. And this is the year of the 150th year of Howard University. So we are unapologetically black institutions that have had tremendous longevity in the United States. Charles Thompson served as editor-in-chief of the Journal of Negro Education for more than 3 decades. There was a recent biography that came out about Dr. Charles Thompson, and the title of it was The Policy Entrepreneur of the Civil Rights Movement. And in that, there are quotes and interviews from many people who knew Dr. Thompson well. One of the things that they said about him in this book is that he was a brilliant essayist who sought to close the gap between America's democratic precepts and its undemocratic practices. It also quoted Dr. Thompson as saying that data collection is merely the first step required to giving sound direction and guidance to an organizational movement. In other words, our publications, our data, our science should not just be for the sake of science, but it should be to advance a cause, to advance a movement that is so vitally important to African Americans in the United States. Now, in many ways, our lecturer, Dr. Freeman Herbowski III, is continuing Dr. Thompson's legacy. He is doing for us today what Charles Thompson did for Black Americans back in the 1930s, the 1940s, and the 1950s. Dr. Herbowski remains attuned to policy imperatives and implements campus-based strategies and national-level thought leadership that helps countless underrepresented students for generations to come to achieve, particularly in the area of STEM. On a personal level, I've had many opportunities to interface with President Herbowski. I've watched him educate people from the highest level to presidents of universities to the Secretary of Education for the United States. But I have to say I am most impressed when I see him interact with students. When I saw him talk to our second cohort of HBCU All-Stars at the White House, back when the White House was the Black House. But when he talked to the students and he signed autographs of his book that was donated to about 60 students, and the book was Holding Fast to Dreams, Empowering Youth from the Civil Rights Crusade to STEM Achievement, his provocative delivery, his poetry, his compelling words, you could see the inspiration in all of their faces. So I want to close by thanking all of you all for really being a part of the history of Howard University. And I sincerely appreciate you all coming here to this room, not only to learn from President Herbowski, but more importantly, leaving this room and acting on his very powerful words. Thank you.
If you're following your program, you will see that I'm supposed to introduce the speaker. But I know what you're saying. He has already been introduced. And so I will not repeat those words. I will share 2 things with you. Number 1, we invite scholars to be the lecturer. And I just want to mention, in addition to the book that Dr. Thompson mentioned, Dr. Herbowski has authored 2 other books, Beating the Odds and Overcoming the Odds. And the other thing I want to mention, in addition to everything else that's been said, is this. He was a child leader in the civil rights movement, and he is prominently featured in Spike Lee's 1997 documentary, 4 Little Girls. And it was based on the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in 1963. So if you get an opportunity, please get a copy of those books and have fun reading. And so now, without further ado, will you please join me in welcoming Dr. Freeman Herbowski III, who will speak to us on the subject, broadening participation in American higher education, a focus on the underrepresentation of African Americans in STEM disciplines. Dr.
Thank you. It's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me in the back rows? I'm a math teacher. I'm always looking to see the faces of the people who are the farthest away. Can you raise your hands if you can hear me in the back? All right? Now, let me ask the students a question. And I want to thank all of you for your wonderful remarks, from my mentee and wonderful friend and fellow president, to my graduate, to Dr. Du Bois, to the leadership of the campus, Dr. Williams and Dr. Hughes, and so many others, and my fellow Hamptonian I saw here, Wade Borkin. You know, students, let me say something. We Hamptonians, we respect Howard a lot, but we Hamptonians, when we go back to our campus, we kiss the ground. Did you hear that? It is our beloved Hampton. And I would want you to feel the same way about your beloved Howard University. A round of applause for Howard University. I tell my students at UMBC, a place that has students from over 100 countries, that I want them to have on my campus, on their campus, the same amazing experience that I had at Hampton, where people believed in me and pushed me and nurtured me and told me all things were possible. You should know that your campus, your university, your president, your provost, your faculty, your deans can only be as good as you are. You represent the best of Howard. And I have a challenge today because I want to give an academic lecture, and I have a paper that I've completed that I just gave them that will be a part of an iterative process, and we'll publish it in the journal. I'm honored, Dr. Thompson. But I want to keep the attention of the students. And it's a balancing act, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But first, I was so surprised when I saw some of the people connected to UMBC, some connected to Hampton, but then my favorite senator in the state of Maryland is here. He is a former educator, an African American who grew up in a poor little neighborhood in North Carolina and went on to went through A&T, became a principal, had the good sense to marry a brilliant woman who also is an alumna of Howard and has a degree in divinity from here. So Senator and Mrs. Curry, would you please stand as my guests and let you all give them a round of applause, would you please? I am honored. I am so honored that they're here. So honored. It is significant that you are celebrating your 150th anniversary. I've had the privilege of knowing presidents of this institution and provosts. I'm so proud to have one of my graduates here. I'm so proud of your president. You know, we in our country have so many reasons to sometimes be critical of leadership at every level in our society. We have the right to think through the types of leaders we want. But when you can say that you have as your leader someone who is a product of your institution, who represents brilliance personified, who speaks with great dignity, even if sometimes you don't agree, I want you to think about the fact that he represents the intellect of Howard. Give your president a round of applause. He represents the intellect. Because whether you know it or not, it is hard as whatever to be a leader. All of you one day will be leaders, young people. All of you. You are at the Mecca, we say. The Mecca. You are considered the height of Negro education, and I would argue the height of American education. When I can think about the people who've come through these walls, through these floors, and who walked, when I can think about the idea, I saw one of your 150th anniversary statements talking about my hero, my mama's hero, Zora Neale Hurston, publishing The First Hilltop. You know, it was Zora Neale Hurston in her amazing book who begins, "Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. For some, they come in with the tide. For others, they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing, until the watcher turns his head away in resignation, his dreams mocked to death. by time. That is the life of men. And my mama would say, and women, somehow. And the idea was there are two groups of people in our society, people whose dreams become reality, the faculty here, the deans here, and now you here, able to come from all kinds of backgrounds, come to the prestigious Howard University in one of the most powerful cities in the world. And then she was talking about people like some of the people you may have grown up with who didn't have the privilege of finishing high school, or who finished high school, didn't make it to college, or went to college and have already dropped out. And so there were two groups. There are two groups always. Those whose dreams become reality, and we say dreams fulfilled. And then those who, in the words of Langston Hughes, see their dreams deferred. And the fundamental difference between the two primarily is education. Young people, I will tell you that on my campus, I am often pointing to the behavior and the intensity of those who come from other countries. Whether they are from Jamaica or Barbados or Ghana or Nigeria or China or Russia or India, there is an intensity, a hunger that makes them so often the best in the world. Our American culture is such that we almost have to fight against being fairly comfortable. And I say when I go to my beloved Hampton, when I'm down in my home state of Alabama and I'm at an HBCU, I'm saying, dare to be extraordinary. Dare to be different. Dare to not let people tell you that because you are a black born in this country, you cannot be the very best. Give me a round of applause for that idea, that you can be the very best. And one of the challenges we face is that the culture of our society is such that it's really hard for students, sometimes of color, to have that intensity, because that is not what people have been pushed to have somehow. And yet, as I say to my students all the time, when we go out and work with the children in Baltimore City, and we see children who still cannot read, and we look at the programs we have for first-time offenders, and we realize that 5 of my children have been killed in the past 2 years because another black child killed them, then we begin to understand why it's important to have a kind of intensity among those who are the best in our society. You represent the best of our race, young people, the best. Give me a round of applause for that. I want some enthusiasm. I want some enthusiasm. You know, I want folks who are texting to stop texting. All right, at UMBC, I'm real, okay? I brought my butt over here to be supportive of you, okay? And I need you to connect with me because I want you to challenge me when I finish. I could give a very academic lecture. I've got it here, and I will talk about some of the research, but I want you to hear me talking about underrepresentation in STEM. But to get to underrepresentation in STEM, I must deal with underrepresentation in education. I must deal with the cultural issues that we face. And so here's the first question. The president of Stanford asked all college presidents a few years ago, how long, and this is for the faculty and the students, how long do you think college students tend to focus on a lecture before they begin to fade out? What do you think? I heard 10 minutes? 5 minutes? So what you're telling me is you've already faded out for me, is that right? Anybody else? It's 8 minutes. And now for the scientists in the room, and Dr. Borkin, you'll appreciate this. When we talk about it, the neuroscientists, how long will neuroscientists say, typically, that somebody can focus before they begin to fade out? What do you think? For anybody, not just college students, anybody well-educated, how long can they focus before they begin to fade out? Let me hear it. I heard 12 minutes. It's 20 minutes. It's 20 minutes, all right? Now, what happens is often you may fade, but then you come back. You know, but you're going to think about, the president's thinking about his next meeting. He's trying to look at me like he's really concerned, but he's really thinking about that next meeting already. The provost's got other things too. And you all are even cooler though. You all looking at text messages and everything else. I see you. I see you with your eyes down. But the idea, and the reason I tell you that is that when thinking about election to the faculty, what we've done at UMBC is to think about how to be innovative in the teaching and learning process. And so we are getting away from 50-minute lectures more and more. We are focused on ways of interacting and having the students interact more to keep them connected to the work and the use of technology. So we've gone in chemistry to chemistry design, where we literally talk about people working in groups of 4, where we get away from the lecture, where it's more hybrid, where they're having to look at questions to be answered using biotech companies on campus for real-life problems, and using an approach that suggests nobody can just sit back and be cool. Everybody has a role, a project manager, a blogger, a provocateur. Now, why do I tell you that? Because I want you, as I talk for a few minutes, because I want students to be prepared to ask me questions, to have a sense of this lecture that will focus primarily on the idea of innovation, of underrepresentation in the STEM fields, and of culture change in our society. And the paper focuses on that. I was sitting in the back of church, the way you're sitting back there, in the middle of the week, not wanting to be there. What child wants to be in church in the middle of the week? And all of a sudden, I hear the guy at the lectern say, if the children participate in this peaceful protest, all of America will understand that even our babies, our young people, know the difference between right and wrong. And as a result, the children will get more resources and go to better schools. Now, we had some great black teachers. They didn't have the resources. We had hand-me-down books. The facilities were run down. And we knew we were treated like second-class citizens. 1963, Birmingham, Alabama, I was 12 years old. Now, like your president, I moved through school soon, so I was going to the 10th grade, so I was precocious. And here I'm sitting in the back doing my little algebra, the 2 things I like best, math and eating. So I'm getting smarter and fatter all the time. And I'm eating M&Ms, the good kind, with the peanuts. You know the kind, right? With the peanuts, right? Right? And I'm eating, and I hear him say, and they can go to better schools. And I look up, and I said, what's his name? And what was his name? Dr. Martin Luther King. And and this man is eloquent, and he is confident. And I go home, and I tell my parents, I've got to go. I've got to march. And my parents look at me, and they say, absolutely not. And I look at them, and I say, wait a minute. You told me to go to church to hear this man. I did. You told me to listen. I kind of did, all right? Now I want to do what he says, and I can't do it. You guys are hypocrites. Now, at that time, students, you did not tell your parents they were hypocrites. What did my daddy say? Go to your room, boy. I knew I was in trouble. But the next morning they came in. They did not sleep that night. And this is what this book of mine is about. What did I have as a child, as experiences that shaped my thinking about producing scientists? And this is what I appreciated. They said, it's not that we don't trust you. We don't know what they will do with you, because if you march, you will go to jail. Now, remember, I told you I was 12. And they said, but if you want to do it, we'll put you in God's hands. And I did go. It was a horrible experience. We were treated like animals. You can imagine. I mean, it was as miserable and as debilitating as you can imagine for children to be treated like animals because they wanted a better education. But in the middle of the week, Dr. King and all of our parents were outside the jail, hundreds of children sleeping on the floor, not enough bathroom facilities, just awful, stinky, awful, animal-like treated. And he said, what you do this day will have an impact on children who've not yet been born. And we all knew, and our parents were trying to be strong for us, and the little kids I'm taking care of are saying, I want my mama, and it was just awful. But I remember feeling inspired that perhaps tomorrow will be better than today. Now, here's the point. That led to the Civil Rights Act in 1964, the Children's March and the March on Washington in this city. And before you know it, in 1964, the Children's March, all of that had led to this. Civil Rights Act and Higher Education Act. Here's my first question to you students. What percent of Americans do you think in 1965 had graduated from college? What percent of Americans had graduated from college? Let me hear. 35? 20? Anybody has done? Don't let me say Howard is risk adverse now. Take a risk. It was only 10%. Only 10% of Americans. At that time, we broke everything into black and white. Let me prove it to you. How many of you, especially the faculty, remember something called black and white TV? Some of the faculty are old enough to remember black and some of the presidents too young to remember black and white TV. Wait a minute. But here's the point. Listen, TV in the 60s was black and white. When they told me we were going to have color TV, I thought they meant they were going to have colored people on TV, all right? But the fact is, so all of a sudden, black and white. So what percent of whites had a college degree? Guess. Huh? 18, good. Somebody else? 32. It was only 11%. What percent of blacks? Between 3 and 4. Between 3 and 4, okay? So most American students, if you don't hear anything else I say, in the 60s, most Americans of any race did not think their children would ever go to college, okay? That's how different the world is. What percent of Americans today have a college degree? I heard 60, somebody else? 25, anybody else? It's only 30%. Now we break it down into all the different racial groups, so let's go with it. Whites, what percent do you think? Only 37%. Blacks, what do you think? It's about 23%. What's the fastest growing group in our country? Hispanic. What percent do you think? It's only 15%. Native Americans below that. What about Asians? It's 55%. 25% of my students are of Asian background because a lot of kids from Asian backgrounds come here to grad school and remain. And then their kids are here, okay? But you put it together. Here's the point, students. Overall, only 30% of Americans have graduated from college. Most American families of every race have never had anyone graduate from college. Let me ask you this question. How many of you in this room, students or faculty, are either first or first generation? Somebody else in your family that graduated from college, either another generation or a brother or sister, stand up now. Let me see who you are. Stand up. Let me see you. Give them a round of applause, too. And I'll tell you why. Here's my message to you. Howard University is far more privileged than 90% of colleges of any race in this country. That's a good thing that African Americans have built a legacy here so that you've got that. But here's the message to you, young people. Of those to whom much is given, much is required. Give me a round of applause for that idea. Of those to whom much is given, much is required. When you tell me you are not first generation college, there's a special responsibility you have to say, I am blessed. My mama went to college, my daddy went to college, a younger brother, sister, and I want to help other people to make it. And so here's what I want you to think about. What I learned from the civil rights movement was that by building that sense of community and focusing on policies and on laws, we changed the culture of our country so that more people thought they could get a college degree. Now I go to the other part, which talks about, well, what happened in math and science? What is the deal there? We've made progress, 25% almost of Americans with college degrees. What percent of the scientists at all the national agencies in our country, from health disparities to the intelligence community to energy, what percent of the scientists in our country at all the national agencies with billions of dollars, what percent do you think are African American? I heard 7. I heard 5. Anybody else? Under 1%. If you texting right now, put your head up. Look at me. I'm looking at you, all right? I'm telling you, I want you to hear me saying that. Not because I want to end with a problem, but I'm beginning with the question of my life. What do we have to do to help many more people of color, starting with African Americans, to do well enough in science that they can think about careers? Because you see, who else is going to solve problems of sickle cell anemia if it's not somebody looking like us? Do you get my point? Who else is going to deal with the challenges involving all kinds of cancers where we see the challenges of our people if it's not people looking like us? It's not that others can't be nice, but when you think about how you bring to the work, whether you are a physician or a scientist, when you bring to the work some of the experiences that people are having, the socio-cultural issues, the stress, the challenges of being an African American in our society, you add to the richness of the problem solving. And when people see that under 1% of the blacks, of the scientists, even at NIH in health disparities, are black, the assumption is that you and I don't have the gravitas to do it. Now there is the issue we've had. What I know is that when I began working with my campus to say, we want to figure out a way to have more blacks getting MD PhDs, everybody said, well, you ought to wait another couple of generations because blacks aren't ready to have that many people with that level of seriousness to go 8 years past college. And my question was, how do you know they're not ready? Well, they haven't done it. Is that a scientific approach? No. So what you're telling me is the highest of scientists in the country, you just take some anecdotal information because you've not seen it, and you're going to tell me I can't convince people that it's important to do. You get my point? Because when you think about who has diabetes in larger percentages, and you look at challenges on every high blood pressure and the cholesterol, all these medical issues, you will see people of color, people from low-income backgrounds are suffering at levels that others have not ever seen. And the question becomes, whether it's in those areas or about the environment, in any of those areas, how do we support and help more people to want to help solve those problems at every level? And when people said we were crazy to think about producing black MD PhDs, we said, let's focus on the problem. And the way faculty we've been able to do it is to build community among students. The thing you're doing, I want those Bison STEM scholars to stand again because they represent the best of the best. Where are they? Let me see what they look like. Give them a round of applause. I'm very proud of Mr. Smith. You tell him I said, very proud. We must learn, and I will tell you in my first years with the Mauhoff, and Tony will remember this, when I first started doing special things for the Mauhoffs, I had black students come to me and say, how come you're doing such special things for them just because they're making A's? And my response was, you never would bother when you saw how special we were to the basketball players. Why is it that we think we ought to do everything for the athletes, and I'm not against athletes, but when it comes to kids doing their best to really kick butt in science, we think you're doing too much special for them. Give those young people another round of applause. They represent the best. The same way we talk about our basketball team when they win. Let me tell you, the fact that UMBC is the national champion in cybersecurity, give us a big round of applause. The same way you would if I had won the Final Four. We must learn to be proud of brain power. We made it to the Final Four in game development. Big round of applause for game development. We made a Final Four in chess. Y'all don't have a chess team. I'm going to challenge you. You got a superb guy in the room who's one of the state champions. Give me a round of applause for pushing yourselves to get a chess team. How can Howard not have a chess team? You got all this brain power here. The best news I can give you is this. Howard University is first in the country in producing blacks who go on to get PhDs in science. Give your campus a round of applause for that. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And yet what the provost and the president are saying is we can be much better. Because there is the point. Because you see, you're supposed to be the best. You've got the most privileged in many ways. You've got a large enough population. You're doing it for some, but you can increase those numbers substantially. We all can. UMBC is the only predominantly white school in that top 10 in producing PhDs in STEM, and we have produced more black MD PhDs than any university in the history of America. Now, you give me a big round of applause for that idea. In the history of America. And so what is the analysis here? It is the idea of redesigning courses, because what do we call the first year of science and engineering in America? What do you know? What do we call it? Weed out courses. I chaired the National Academy's Committee on STEM underrepresentation. Only 5% of our Americans at 25 have degrees in STEM. Only 5%. And unfortunately for blacks, it's much lower. And when we looked at the data, everybody said, well, it's a K through 12 problem. Then others said, well, it really is a family problem. And then the husband said, well, it's the white side of the family that's the problem. Everybody blamed somebody else, all right? But when we looked at the data, we found this. The more prestigious the university, the higher the SATs, the larger the number of AP credits, the greater the chance a student who starts in science will leave it. So the students who go to the most prestigious of New England institutions start off in pre-med science, and they often leave it. Why? Because in any kind of institutions, blacks and whites, most people who start in science leave it within the first year or two. And there's the challenge for UMBC, for Howard, for every place. And that's what we've worked on with redesigning courses in addition to the work like with the Bison Center, because the work requires a lot of support from each other, and STEM work is too often cutthroat. I won't tell you what I know because you may not tell me what you know, you see, and so we don't get that collaboration that makes all the difference. And then the other big issue is the use for the faculty and administration of analytics. Using academic analytics to determine who is succeeding, who is not, what the trends are by class, by section, by faculty member, and then not to point fingers, but in order to understand where are the best practices that we can replicate when we see them. And then for us, we use Blackboard in order to show students in real time how their performance compares to others based on the amount of time they're spending in studying with other people and the amount of time they're spending in studying. Because I'm going to tell you in STEM on my campus, if you're not putting in 4 to 6 hours a day, you cannot make it. Because my African-American kid who comes from New York or DC is competing against my kid who's from China or India or Barbados. And they come in with that intensity, with that hunger that I want to see African-Americans develop. The same way we get so excited about basketball or about entertainment, we must learn, and you have to be the leaders because you're at the Mecca of those to whom much is given, much is required. You should be the African American, as my students believe they are, the ones who are saying, as leaders to everybody else, we can do this. And I would say this, it's not that everybody has to major in STEM, because I would say it's just as important to be superb in the arts, in the humanities, in the social sciences. Big round of applause for the arts, the humanities, and the social sciences. What I would challenge you to do is to think about ways of connecting disciplines. This is what we've worked to do. The name of the game these days is data science. From the humanities to the social sciences. And data science is at the intersection of computational work and statistical work. And the social sciences have become increasingly data science oriented. And so we should be helping our students at every level, undergrad through grad, to use technology, to use statistics in the work that they're doing. It makes all the difference in the world. And so this is what I want you to have as I close, because I want you to have time for questions. There are 2 things I would say. Number 1, culture of the campus is very important. At the end of my paper, I say this. At my campus, we've come to realize that the culture of an institution can be seen every day on the campus. In the faces of students in classes as you walk by, are they engaged? Are they excited? Are they fighting about the ideas? It is evident in the questions that we ask, in those we choose to ignore, in the achievements we record and the ones we celebrate, in those that go unnoticed, in the incentives that we choose to support and those we do not. It was Eric Weiner, writing in his book, Geography of Bliss, that said, where we are is vital to who we are. And by where, he said, I'm speaking not only of our physical environment, but also of our cultural environment. And here's the sentence I want you to hear. Culture is the sea we swim in, so pervasive, so all-consuming, that we fail to notice its existence until we step out of it. I challenge you, Howard University, step out of yourselves. Understand that as good as you are, you can be so much better. Challenge yourselves to look at each person to bring out the best. Give your leaders the support they need by asking good questions, understanding their challenges, and being truthful with them, bringing authenticity to the work. At the end of my mother's life, I tell this story over and over again. There she was at my house, having taught English for 40-some years and math, having been a child made in the country, in the rural part of Alabama, having learned to read because she was using the library in the house where she washed the bathroom floors. And I asked her, as she looked at me, what are you thinking about? And she said this. What am I thinking about? She said, I know the end is near. And my mama had developed dementia, and she kind of knew who I was, and I'm an only child. And I said, so what's important to you now? She said, what's important? Relationships. She said, my relationship with my God. She said, you hold on to your faith. You'll be okay. I was trying not to cry. You don't want to see your mama at the end of her life. And then she said, my relationship with my husband, he's a wonderful man. She had forgotten my daddy had died 20 years before, and you never remind him because that's just more pain for her. You don't tell her, you know? And then she said, my relationship with my son, and she looks at me and she says, do you know him? I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm an only child. I'm thinking I'm the only child, all right? She's telling me, I'm thinking, oh my God, she is dropping this bomb in my lap that she had a child when she's a teenager and she never told me about it. And I'm thinking, TMI, too much information, right? So all my grief turns to anger. I'm angry. I'm thinking, oh, you're going to drop this bomb and leave me. I don't want no brother now. I ain't had no brother all these years, right? And I said, what? And she said, yeah, he's a college president. She's talking about me, thank God. I had forgotten she didn't know who I was. You get the point? But then she said, my relationship with my students, that's the essence of my life. She said, teachers touch eternity through their students. Whatever I had to give, my sense of right and wrong, my lust for learning, my belief in those children, I gave them that sense of self. And she said, I will always live through those children. And there's the challenge to Howard University, your relationships with each other and with your students. Howard, as you celebrate your 150th anniversary, I challenge you to watch your thoughts. They become your words. Watch your words. They become your actions. Watch your actions. They become your habits. Watch your habits. They become your character. Watch your character. It becomes your destiny. Howard University, you are remarkably special, and you can be even better. Dreams and values. Thank you all very much.
At this time, we'll entertain some questions. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, students. Take care. Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Diego LeBron, finance major, Montgomery County, Maryland, HU19. Regarding your statement about the chess status at Howard University.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask you one question in regards to that. Once it's made and founded, can I expect you to have the support with scholastic tournaments with your team at UMBC?
We would be delighted to kick your butts. We really would. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Zephaniah Galloway. I'm a freshman political science and African American studies double major from Cleveland, Ohio.
Very good.
And I just wanted to know, how do you suggest that we change the culture of, I guess, being hype for intellectuals as much as we are for, like you were saying, basketball, not only in universities, but also in underrepresented communities?
I think the first thing and most important for Howard as a beginning is that those who have that intellectual bent, who are interested in the life of the mind, need opportunities in communities to talk about ideas. And for me and for our campus, what we've done is to work to have that connected to working to help children in our society. The biggest issue I see is that 40-50% of black kids in America cannot read. Okay, I would start there, just in the civic engagement. Civic engagement to me is what civil rights marching was to people 40 years ago.
Awesome.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Chelsea Berry. Thank you so much for the pearls of wisdom that you shared this evening.
Thank you.
This lecture is really important because both I and Dr. Thompson are from Jackson, Mississippi.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's exciting. And you spoke about the underrepresentation of us in STEM.
Yes.
I'm the STEM coordinator at the Howard University Middle School of Mathematics and Science. And in our efforts to deepen their interest and sustainability in the STEM pipeline, how do you propose that career and technical education, CTE, become a pathway that we use to deliver STEM in a system that we can reach them in an earlier part of the STEM pipeline?
In other countries, people use the applied approach in the teaching of science. So when I worked with Japan and Germany, the apprenticeship program in Germany, for example, was amazing because when we tested the apprenticeship kids who were not going to university after, but going into the workplace, they were working in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade with white coats as technicians. They did better in chemistry on the international exam than our children who had 5s on AP chemistry. Hands-on experiences make a big difference. One of the reasons we're the cybersecurity champions is large numbers of my students from the corridor, from Howard County, Montgomery County, have worked at the National Security Agency since they were 15 and 16. and they get those experiences. That hands-on experiences make a big difference. They really do. We need more hands-on experience. For middle school children, the number one skill they need would be the reading. Because if you give me a child who can read well, I can teach her to solve math word problems. It's the reading the reading and thinking that's really critical. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Okay.
Hi. My name is Kelechi Bekwe. I am a freshman economics and international business major from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Yeah, nobody knows where Minnesota is, but
I've got kids from Minneapolis. Yeah.
okay, good. So, I'm currently working on a project on you. So I'm just like shook. I'm shook. I'm shook. But I have too many questions
You're
for you.
shaking, really interesting.
Shaking.
I love it though. That's scary, but go right ahead.
I have way too many questions for you, but I'm only going to ask one.
Yes.
So, from the age of 12, you've been an activist and an advocate, and obviously an amazing leader, amazing person. And from the Children's Crusade to For Little Girls to President's advocacy, I'm just, can you give us a time where you weren't feeling like you were so exceptional? Like the way we see you now, you're amazing.
No. My parents sent me to Massachusetts in the summers to see what it would be like to be in class with whites. And I studied literature and math and chemistry. The education was amazing, very rigorous, far more substantial than what we got in Southern schools. But nobody would speak to me. Not children, not the teachers. Even if I raised my hand when nobody else was raising a hand, the teacher would look right through me. I really came to appreciate, even at an early age. I was 13 going to the 11th grade, and everybody there was maybe 16, but they would not speak. I was the only black kid, and it was very hurtful. And I called home and I said to my parents, they're not nice. She said, well, how's the education? I said, it's really good. It's really hard. I'm learning a lot. And she said, how many colored children, she said, do you think have the privilege of being in this school or any school there from Alabama? I said, I don't see any. She said, so how do you evaluate your situation? I said, well, I'm privileged. I said, but they hurt me. They don't speak. She says, baby, let me tell you something. I didn't send you there to be liked. She said, do you know how much we love you? Yeah. Have you always had love? Yeah. She said, baby, she said, in the name of God, suck it up. Suck it up. I was so shocked. Now, I learned years later, she got off that phone and cried like a baby, that they would do her child like that. But you know what she said? She had to toughen me up because life was not fair. Give me a round of applause for that idea. Life is not fair. It is not. It really is not. I still feel the hurt, though. Even now, when I went back to speak there, I said, you wouldn't speak to me. You see what I'm saying? And my point to them was, a child never forgets how you make them feel. Yeah. That was the most awful experience I had. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm proud of you. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, sir. How are you? I'm Gabrielle Artis, a third-year master specialist student in the school psychology program. I'm also an alum of Eleanor Roosevelt High School in Greenbelt, Maryland, and an overwhelming number of my classmates and alum from that school went to UMBC as well, graduated from UMBC, Forbes, 30 under 30, all of these other, accolades, and they're black.
Yeah.
Black, African. My question for you is, how do we, especially as an HBCU, target children in high school? How do we do that type of outreach? Because as much as I remember UMBC being present, and I know it being a state school added to the allure of it, how does Howard, which is right around the corner, appeal to a number of students so that we can bring students into STEM programs?
No, I think and Mr. President, I would say, Roosevelt is such an amazing school. It really is one of the leading schools, the science and tech program, where you will have, it really is. That we spent a lot of time there. We really went to that school. The principal is his son went to UMBC.
Mr. McNeil.
He's black, but I would say if you've not been there, I would recommend it because they would be impressed to see a surgeon who's a president. Right? It is just that good. You can get a lot. I would say 20% of my Mile House have come out of that school. It's just that good. It really is. By the way, just a sense of things. Right now, I can tell you that the first black woman and second to get a PhD in computer science from Michigan are my students who graduated. The first one from Purdue, one of ours. Literally 4 black males who are now in the faculty of the Duke Medical School with endowed chairs in 2 cases right now. And I can go on like that. But and what we do is we take those successes as you have them and go back to those schools and say, you can be on the faculty at Duke one day, right? I come that way. And Howard has had that kind of success. But it's marketing when you have that success, because see, bad news travels fast. Good news you got to work at. So if the students here have a big protest, everybody's talking about it. You know that. And while you may be trying to help things here, it ain't helping you to bring in more students. You get my point? So I'm always telling my students, y'all come talk to me before you go all that newspaper stuff, because that ain't going to help you. You want more black students, you're not going to get them by, right? You know, good news takes effort. And that's what you want. You got so many good news stories here. Really
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Hi.
Hi, my name is Chris Flowers. I'm a freshman computer engineering major from Columbia, Maryland, and I was just wondering if you have any words of wisdom or advice for myself, my colleagues, and anyone else in the room who might be on a PhD track, regardless of the...
The 2 things I would say: 1, build strong community among the students so you help each other. If my house motto is this: if you got 5 students, my house in the room, and 4 get A's on the test and 1 gets a D, they should all feel bad. Okay, you get my point? It's not just about you. Any program that really is about nobility, it's about leadership to help others to succeed, right? You know, I mean, you're getting an A is okay, that's good. That's just the first step. The question is, and learn how to explain with clarity concepts. And then 3rd, it takes researchers to produce researchers. Get to know the researchers here at Howard and in the region, and make sure you're immersed in research as early as possible.
Okay.
Very important. One of the challenges that your president would know about is that there's been a major decline in black males in med school. So we've decided to take up a big effort to try to get more to think about that, because it's a real challenge in our country. But it takes strong grades in those first 2 years of science. I'm going to go fast. He's telling me it's about that time. I can tell.
Okay. Thank you.
Let me just see quickly, and then we'll go ahead.
One more?
One more question, then you all can talk to me after this, okay? All right, for a minute.
Hi, Dr. Rabowski. My name is Amin Mohammed.
Go ahead.
Freshman mechanical engineering major, PhD.
Yes.
You spoke to my question a little earlier, but it was a little broader. I want to know, what do you think causes young African Americans who are in STEM fields to drop out, not just whites and blacks, but just specifically blacks?
African Americans, number 1, they've got to have the academic preparation. They need to know, what does it take to succeed. Number 2, often they've not known how hard you have to work. You know, you're talking 4, 5, 6 hours a day. All right. Number 3, you got to be willing to get help and ask for help. And black males tend to be the least likely to be willing to say, help me. And that's Hispanic males, and that's white males. We have a thing about asking for help or taking advice about directions even. So you want to be able to ask for help and just say, I don't understand. Admit it, right? That's for people in general, but we tend to not just put it out there. I need help early. You don't wait until you get a D. It's all along the way. You got to be saying, give me that help. I need that help. There's nothing that takes the place of hard work other than having the humility to say, I need help. Everybody stand up. I'm going to get you to remember this poem with me. Come on, stand up, everybody. Repeat after me. Thoughts, words, actions, habits, character, destiny. Again, thoughts, words, actions, habits, character, destiny. Let's see if you know it. Watch your thoughts. They become your
actions.
See, you weren't listening. Y'all were just saying it, but you weren't being mindful. Okay, this time, being mindful in every class. The psychologist, boy, I'll tell you got to focus on it. You got to focus. You got it? Okay, now this time we're going to say it. You're preparing for the test. So when I say it, you got to memorize it. Thoughts, words, actions, habits, character, destiny. One last time. Thoughts, words, actions, habits, character, destiny. Here we go. Watch your thoughts. They become your... Watch your words, they become your. Watch your actions, they become your. Watch your habits, they become your. Watch your character becomes your. Round of applause for Howard University.
Let's give our speaker another round of applause, please. Okay, thank you all for coming, and now meet us in the gallery lounge for our reception. Thank you. See you next year.